Let's get to Carl Quintanilla, who is there in Greece watching this happen. Carl, what is happening?
Well, it's about 9:30, almost 9:30 here, local time, Aaron. So a long day is coming to a close. You're obviously going to live with the effects as you go into the close in New York. But Greece has been through a couple different chapters. One, of course, was the ECB commentary from Trichet earlier this morning. You and Leisman talked about that and sort of the mystery as to why Trichet is not backing up his rhetoric with more substantive quantitative easing. Then there was this Greek parliament vote late this afternoon, and the protest or the rally that we managed to get into, a lot of chants, people chanting things like "your stolen profits have taken human lives," the Greek police in blue, the special forces in green protecting the parliament. But Aaron, it all came down for me today to one conversation we had with a teacher who was on strike today. He said, despite the violence yesterday, the protests are going to continue until we win. I said, until you win what? He said, until we get the IMF out of local policy making. I said, well, how are you going to pay back all the debt that you owe to these European banks? And his response was, I don't know, and I don't care. And I think even though you might see some signs that there is progress being made here in Athens, maybe tomorrow in Germany, we're still dealing with two sides that, at least fundamentally, are very, very, very far apart, Aaron.
All right, Carl Quintanilla, thank you. I know hopefully we'll have Carl still there, but obviously, given what's going on there, he's moving around. So we'll go back to him as we can. In the meantime, I'm here with Simon Hobbs and Sue Herrera. Simon knows a lot about this situation. I know you just heard Carl say he was speaking to a teacher, and when it came down to, Carl said, well, what are you fighting for? When are you going to pay those banks back? And he said, I don't know, and I don't care.
Well, the people that you see on the screen now don't regard the fact that so much money has been borrowed as their fault. They regard it as part of the corruption in general of politicians and a failure of the state. Why should they now have their wages and their pensions cut? They didn't see great upside on the way into this. I mean, there's a miscommunication. What we really need, Erin, what we all need to see to try and get rid of this contagion threat is unity. Now that they've had the vote come through, you need the Prime Minister to go out and attempt to unite everybody behind, as best he can, this austerity.
But isn't it bigger than that, Simon? Don't we need the political will of Germany and France and the EU to take the very tough measures that so far they have refused to do? Yes, the aid package is there, but it's fundamentally probably not quite big enough.
I mean, really, Sue, I think what you really need now, and this is what's been the discussion on prop desk today, is whether or not the European Central Bank is going to exercise the nuclear option, which essentially means that they go into the market and very aggressively start buying up government bonds without announcing it to the market.
That's what the market wants them to do. Right. Whether they will do it or not, I don't know.
The shorts would not, but essentially to burn them, and to bring the whole thing down, because it is. Even if you look at the LIBOR rate, for goodness sake, the whole thing is beginning to get out of control, and you need shock and awe. Somebody has to come through and get ahead of the market.
What about what Steve Leisman pointed out, that there were 3 times in his speech today when European Central Bank President Jean-Claude Trichet in Lisbon said Greece will not default. We all know Greece has been in default half of its modern history, right?
It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to act on it.
Right. Now, but if that's true, you've got two-year Greek yields at what, 15%? I mean, Steve was just raising the question of, hey, look, for the those with incredible intestinal fortitude, there may be a trade here if the quantitative easing happens.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it is within the power of the European Central Bank to prevent them from defaulting by buying the debt.
Yes.
I mean, that is the end game. But he didn't say it today. Today he said we haven't discussed it. He cannot do it at this stage because of that German, not the vote on Friday, but the election in West Rhine-Pfalz on Sunday. He cannot be seen to affect that result. But the feeling is, once that result has come in Germany, on Monday, perhaps, on Tuesday, perhaps, unannounced, for maximum bang, they could come in and start aggressively buying that.
The worry also is the run that's going on in the euro right now. I mean, we've penetrated several key support levels just in this session alone.
Yes.
You know, we're looking at 124, 120 is next, and it wouldn't surprise me, given the fact that going into the end of the week, we have the British elections, we have that very important election, as you mentioned, in Germany, to see them test that. The market is going to force their hand and find out.
To be honest, I don't think the politicians will give a stuff what the euro does at this stage. provided it doesn't go into free fall and become disorderly. They won't regard that as their immediate problem. They've got people rioting on the streets.
It has the feeling of disorder, though. If you talk to somebody, I was talking to the currency desks, you can hardly hear they're screaming so loud. It has that
but not
feeling.
To the politicians.
What do you think?
They won't, that's the point I'm making.
Right.
They've got more immediate concerns. And actually, a lot of the politicians for jobs and growth would like the euro to be lower, to be perfectly honest with you. They might argue it was overvalued against the dollar. I mean, what? Sorry, forgive me, Aaron.
I just was going to bring in Scott Wapner. Maybe it was, I don't know, not that you were being very optimistic, Simon. So maybe you gave them all the pessimism they could handle. No, we're down nearly 300, but we're now only down about 250. Scott, do you see any kind of a pickup here in terms of improvement, or no?
Well, the market has clearly bounced about 50 points, Aaron, off of its worst levels. But what's happened because of the very images that we're watching together on the screen here, and then the uncertainty about what's happening across the continent of Europe. Let me bring in Peter Costa again, trader down here on the floor. We've seen risk, Peter, taken off the table, right? We can see that movement into the dollar today, which has further pressed down U.S. equities. We've seen a big move into gold, that classic flight to safety, flight to quality, almost across the board. Tell me a little bit about how risk, or the lack thereof, in this market is affecting what's happening on the board.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be risk in this market. But, you know, looking at where the money is over in Europe and how they may be starting to move back into the U.S. again, you know what? Let's temper this a little bit, all right? The market's down 250. Yeah, we do have more room to go on the downside.
Couple that with a few other days, though, Peter.
Yeah, no, we've had a significant move over the last week, and what I'm going to say to you is that at some point, this money that's moving out of Europe because of the uncertainty and all the, you know, the danger of being invested in Europe is going to start moving into U.S. equities again because the earnings are there to show it. I mean, I've been bearish for a long time, but you know what? At some point, when we're looking at the market and maybe around the 1,000 level in the S&P, I know that's 10.5%. You want to be back in here. All right, so I'm not saying that this is going to be the end of the world here for us. I'm talking about equities and when the time to get back in. And we're going to be reaching that point within the next couple of weeks if we continue this.
Peter Costa, thanks so much. Aaron, traders watching these very images that we are as I send it back to you.
All right. Well, Scott, we'll be coming to you in a couple of moments. I'm here with Simon Hobbs and Sue Herrera, and we want to add in David Lutz of Stifel Nicholas. David, you're looking at a few things. You're using the word violent to describe what we're seeing on the short end of the U.S. yield curve, and also talking about a 9-month high in a crucial measure of whether banks will lend to each other.
Absolutely, Aaron. I mean, we're talking to our equity clients about a lot of the things going on in the credit market right now. As you just mentioned, the TED spread, which shows the interbank lending concerns, has just hit a 9-month high. LIBOR OIS, which shows a measure of cash availability in the system, is jumping as well. That's showing that financial institutions are hoarding cash to a degree. And finally, you know, the IG-14 basket of 125 investment-grade CDS credits, that's at 9-month highs. All of these things are just driving money into the Treasury market. 10-year yields down 40 basis points below that key 3.5% level we've talked about in the past. 4-week bills squeezing violently today, down 10 basis points, now yielding only 3 basis points. And all of the risk spreads that we're seeing against treasuries for either asset-backed securities, RMBS, CNBS, they're all widening out. So the credit market is starting to build in a tremendous amount of risk. And I think a lot of it has to do with that concern about bank lending right now.
Exactly. David, it's Sue Herrera, David. Can I ask you about that?
Hi, Sue.
Because I think Simon brought up an excellent point, and that is the self-serving nature of each one of the countries that is involved in this particular conflict. Some of them would like to see the euro go into a free fall because it helps their particular economies when it comes to jobs and the like. But they are also going to protect their own self-interest in terms of banks. And that's the type of situation, not that we're going to repeat 2008, certainly, but that was the same type of distrust that you saw developing around the Bear Stearns of the world and the Lehmans of the world, right? I mean, am I wrong about that? The distrust about lending to each other and trusting each other's books and trusting risk with each other?
You know, Sue, I think you're dead on. Clearly not nearly as bad as we saw a year and a half ago, but there is a level of mistrust that's getting built into the system. And, you know, the big thing